I have been working with Eightfold for a long time, and what I'm going to do, first of all, there's going to be a special guest as part of my presentation that's going to be really kind of interesting for you guys. But what I'm going to talk about is what is this big thing called talent intelligence, why is it so important, and where is it going? And the idea that I want to leave you with this morning is not only understanding what talent intelligence is, but why it's important and where it's going. Because I know a lot of you that are out there shopping for tools and technologies are sort of enamored with the idea of AI, but you've got to sell it to your organization. You have to apply it. You have to get an ROI. You have to get a budget for it, and you have to get a team associated with it. And I am convinced that this is the future of how we're going to run our companies. This is the future of how we're going to run HR. And those of you that, and we were talking just in the back of the room in the beginning, it's a little bit like if you have a gas-powered car and you see the electric car shooting by and you try to keep up with it, you can't quite keep up with it, and you're burning a lot of gas and you're creating a lot of emissions. That's what's going on with talent intelligence. All right, so why is it important? First of all, we're living in a really interesting economic time. I mean, you saw the stock market just hit an all-time 10 minutes ago. I don't know if you guys saw that. We are basically living in a transformation of the economy and the way our companies operate. I won't take you through the details behind this slide. We have a white paper on this. But essentially what's been going on for the last maybe 15 or 20 years is we've moved from the industrial model of companies. The industrial model was we build something, we farm something, we produce something, we sell it, we sell more and more and more of it, we drive down the cost, we create an integrated supply chain, we increase barriers to entry through our scale, and we become a bigger and bigger company. And that was basically the model for the agrarian age and the industrial age up until the invention of the internet. And I worked, at IBM prior to the internet, prior to PCs, and companies like IBM and General Motors and GE and all of the companies of that era were unstoppable. Nobody could stop them. They were dominant forces. They took care of their employees for their entire careers, and it was good. It was fine. Along comes the internet. All of a sudden, things started to move faster. Employees started to jump around from company to company. Good ideas went with the employees. So all of a sudden, all the intellectual property that you had in your scale industrial business moved to somebody else, and they built something that was competing with you faster than you could, because time to market, innovation, creativity, customer service, customer intimacy became the differentiator of companies in the internet era. Amazon, for example. Most of you remember when Amazon was unprofitable and nobody thought they'd be a very big company. And sure enough, that became a whole new business model. And we're now moving to a new one, which is really going to be, AI superpowering employees to accelerate all these value-added services we provide in the past. Well, what happened, of course, when we moved from the first two boxes to the third and the fourth box, we left all our HR processes behind, and we tried to drag them along with us. So performance management, succession management, how we do recruiting, job-based profiles, looking at people's resumes and not understanding their skills, those were things that worked fine in the old model, but they don't work anymore. And not only is that happening, but the size of the labor market is not growing. If you look at the size of the labor market in the blue line, the number of workers in the United States, I'll talk about the unemployment rate in a minute, and the growth of the US GDP, it's ridiculous how much money per employee we are generating today versus what we did 10, 15, 20 years ago. Every employee in your company, every year, is generating a higher and higher revenue number. In fact, one of the ways that I analyze the effectiveness of our clients is I look at their revenue per employee against their peers. And you can see the companies that are highly effective at this, and you can see the companies that aren't. It's just completely obvious. But there's another problem, and that is the size of the labor market. You've seen this. It's been the New York Times. It's been the Economist. Lots and lots of things have been written about this. But we do have an aging population. We are not having children. Most of the young people are postponing getting married. They're postponing the idea of having children at all. Maybe they'll have children a little bit later. They're living longer, but they're not living the lives that we did when I was young, where you kind of get out of college, have kids, work, and retire at the age of 65. It's not like that. It's much, much more elongated. And so the size of the labor market is actually smaller, and it's shrinking in almost every developed economy. And this is actually an interesting chart. When I drew it, is that we always think that the unemployment rate is cyclical with the economy. It kind of is, but if you step back, it's not. It's actually going down. I mean, I remember in most of my career before the last couple of years, 4% unemployment was really low. It was like weird. Well, we've been having below 4% employment now for, I don't know, 2, 3, 4 years. It just keeps on happening. So what we're dealing with is we have to create super-powered employees. We have fewer of them. It's harder to hire them. They have more opportunities. And the company is dependent on every single one. Every nurse, every retail person, every truck driver, every repair person, every salesperson, every marketing person is adding incremental value at a higher and higher rate. And this is forcing us to rethink the way we do everything in HR. But it's even more complicated than that, because the workforce expectations are also changing. I drew this chart just to sort of I went through a little history lesson in my mind a couple of months ago, and I drew this chart, and I think back about all the companies that I used to know about when I got out of college and where we are today. The world has changed significantly. The average employee today changes jobs every 2 to 2.5 years. 45 to 50% of the workers in the United States change jobs every year. By the way, it'll probably go down if we have a recession, but it's still going to be in the 20 to 30%. And of those people that change jobs, almost half of them change industries. Now, those of you that are my age, we never changed industries. Most of the people that I worked with in the early days of my life basically stayed at the same industry their whole career. Nobody would ever think of changing industries, because you can take your skills with you from company A to industry B, industry C. So things are completely different. And added to that, post-pandemic, we're still getting over the shock of the pandemic. I think, I look at what my children are going through in their lives. They're in their 30s. I look at the data on people younger. There's a lot of leftover stress and trauma that we haven't really gotten over from people working at home, isolated from their peers, isolated from their friends and the people that they would want to have, personal relationships at work. And this data, I'm not making this up. This is from Gallup. I just found it the other day. I mean, we're kind of at an all-time low measured by traditional measures of employee engagement. And, so what does that mean? Employees are saying, well, you know what? Maybe I'll quietly quit if I don't like this place. Maybe I'll tell the company what I want to do. Instead of doing what they want me to do, I'll take this job and I'll turn it into my job. So I want to have power. I want to have autonomy, because there's other opportunities for me. And of course, we didn't design all our job models and organization structures for this much autonomy. Now, it's getting there, but these are real issues that we face in sort of a discontinuous way. I mean, the reason I say discontinuous in my particular case, I saw this when I was at Deloitte, and you guys know I did a lot of research when I was there. I mean, I saw symptoms of these things happening and lots of data over many, many years, and there were lots of people, trying things like holacracy and other ideas. But ultimately, the reality hit. We are basically there. We are in what we used to call the future of work. It is here now. The final thing I'll just mention that's even more sort of disruptive to HR. By the way, you guys, the timer is not working, so I don't know how much time I have left. And you know me, I could go for an hour with this stuff. So somebody catch up the timer. This is a big one. So just this morning I was reading the University of California students, graduate students and staff are going on strike as of today, or they're threatening to go on strike based on the Palestinian-Israeli issue, which has nothing to do with wages, labor conditions, nothing. That is how much activation there is in the employee base. Now, we call it activation because what was really happening is we can't expect employees to do what we want and wait for them to tell us what they like and they don't like. They are going to have to activate us because they're going to do it on their own. You can look at this data. These are really kind of striking statistics. The fact that 87% of Americans want to work flexibly, 68% want free mental health services. By the way, it's more than that. I actually was at a conference 2 months ago where companies are providing psychedelics now to employees because they're asking for that. So you got to kind of open your mind to these new things. I mean, I'm a lot older than most of you, so I'm getting with it. I'm ready for the 4-day week. I made a big stink about that in Vegas last week. I mean, this is what people want. So we're going to have to kind of move a little faster on how to redesign our organizations to take advantage of this. Now, what is happening on the business side? This chart blew me away. If you look at obviously the stock market's doing great, all sorts of companies are growing like crazy, but most of the companies that are growing are basically relatively young companies. Now, Microsoft, who we're going to hear from in a minute, is a relatively older company, but it's unusual. We're going through an enormous acceleration of creative destruction of organizations. And that gets back to what I talked about in the very beginning. It's because companies aren't ready to move fast and reinvent and recreate and redesign themselves. So we, of course, took it upon ourselves to look into this and figure out what are companies doing and what do they need to do to adapt. And I think where AI is AI is basically the defining technology that's going to be the fundamental piece behind our business transformation over probably the next 10 years. You remember how we had chief digital officers and we didn't know how to build websites and we didn't know how to build mobile apps and all that stuff was like black magic? Well, AI is going to do the same thing, but probably even more. What do we need to do to get there? Well, there's a couple of things I want to just mention, that lead to talent intelligence. The first is we're going to have to flatten the organization. I remember, showing this chart to people in 2015, 2016, and people were kind of like not sure whether it was really true, whether it was really going to happen. Almost every company we talk to is going through a job architecture project, simplifying the job titles, reducing the number of levels. Why are we doing that? To create agility. Because all those mid-managers that all wanted to get promoted and they all wanted their little private parking places or corner offices or whatever it is they get in the way every time you want to make a change. So how do you get rid of that sort of bureaucracy? Is you just flatten the organization, increase the span of control, give people more autonomy, train people more. This is happening all over the place. Number two, we need to move from a job-based architecture to a person or skills-based architecture. Now, we built this chart about a year ago when we first started figuring out what was going on, and I'm going to talk about the skills-based organization in a minute, which I'm not a fan of that term at all, but we'll talk more why I say that. This is a big deal. In the organizations that thrive today, we need to be able to move people around, reskill them, redeploy them, give them multiple projects. You're going to hear from Microsoft in a minute about the 60,000 projects going on at Microsoft. I believe that's the number. And we need to design our infrastructure and HR and technology around that. This new person-centric architecture is not the way Workday, Oracle, and SAP were designed. They were not designed for that. They were designed for job title, job level, benefits, promotion, training, all based on that functional hierarchy. So talent intelligence systems, which may seem a little bit sort of amorphous to you, are really the fundamental technology we need to run our companies in this new era. So that's the reason this stuff is important. Now, getting back to sort of the business, justification for this, we decided last year, the way we run our companies, we get all this information from you guys and we kind of hear what's going on, and then we eventually say, let's do a study and really figure this out. So we did a study last year of organizational mobility, and what we found was that when you go through all of the aspects of this highly adaptable, dynamic mobility type organization versus the traditional organization, they break down into 4 groups. And I won't take you through this data. You can see it on our website. But basically, there are a significant number of companies that are operating at the top. And what you find about those companies is they move faster, they realign more quickly, they go to market in a more integrated way, and they have 7 times more likely to innovate over their peers. Now, the reason I wanted to show you this chart is for those of you that sort of pay attention to the kind of stuff we do, we generally create a chart like this for all the major studies we do. Usually the multipliers of the level 3, level 4 companies to level 1, 2 companies are 2 times, 2.5 times, 3 times, 21 times, 3 times, 20 times, 31 times, 17 times. These multipliers are extraordinarily high compared to the ones we looked at before. Because this idea of being dynamic is the fundamental issue that's going to be on the minds of CEOs going forward. 45% of the CEOs in the PwC survey that came out in January said that 10 years from now, the company they're leading today will not exist. And the number one issue they have is, how do I drive change faster? In fact, there's comments all over that report of CEOs saying, I need to spend more time on transformation, less time on execution. That is a very, very different way to think about the company. Now, let me give you just one example. Netflix. We have a very deep relationship with Netflix, a very good relationship with Disney. We're going to be down in LA next week at our conference. We're going to be having both those companies come to our conference and talk about what they're doing. Netflix is revenue per employee is twice that of Google. Everybody thinks Google is the most effective, successful, productive company in the world. No, Netflix is twice as productive as them. If you go to Netflix and you get to know what they do, it's a flat organization, it's a meritocracy, they're very focused on skills, very focused on what they call talent density, and they outperform their peers by almost an order of magnitude. And I just heard on the radio this morning on the way coming over here, they just signed the NFL. The NFL, they're now doing live. Netflix is going live, so they're going after YouTube. So these guys are a perfect example of how this agile, adaptable, meritocracy, skills-based organization leads to growth, 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 and adaptability. By the way, you remember when Netflix announced they were going to have an advertising-based model a couple of, I don't know, like 6 months ago, 9 months ago? They did it. They're making a ton of money doing it. They partnered with Microsoft yesterday, and I noticed that they said, well, we don't need Microsoft anymore. We're doing it ourselves. That's how fast these guys go. By the way, it's not a very big company. I think they have 14,000 employees. It's actually a relatively small company. So that's an example of how big this is. So what does this all mean to talent stuff? Well, the first thing I want to talk about is recruiting, because a lot of you are in recruiting. In the industrial model, we had this model we called hire to grow. And every company that I worked for early in my career, whenever there was a growth spurt, the CEO would say, hire, get more people, hire more sales people, we need more marketing people, we need more engineering people, we need more people. Because more people equals more scale equals more growth. Well, that's not really true. Because actually what happens when you hire more and more people, you're bringing low productivity people into the company at an increasingly rate of speed, and you actually start to reduce your productivity as you hire more people. What Netflix basically says is, we're not going to do it that way. Every person we hire has to add value to the existing team, and if the new person doesn't make the existing team smarter, we don't need them. We can do this ourselves. And they call that talent density. I have a big article about talent density on our website if you want to read about it. But this idea that hiring and hiring and hiring to grow has got to go. In fact, I believe that in the years of AI, which are coming over the next decade, we're going to probably find in almost every industry that the smaller companies are outperforming the bigger companies, because the bigger companies are stuck with more bureaucracy and more of this sort of hiring problems than the smaller companies. Now, what does that mean to you if you're in talent acquisition, right? You've been given a job to go hire more people. Well, we just produced a report last week or the week before that shows that most talent acquisition leaders are incredibly frustrated that they aren't involved in these more strategic decisions. They're getting treated like the Amazon fulfillment center. Go out and get us some more people and hurry up. Why can't you get them in here faster? Well, we have to think about this in a much more systemic way. the way we define it is if you want to grow your company in this new sort of economy, in this new model, you need to think about recruiting as one of the ways to grow. Retention is another way to grow, because if you're losing 20% of the people every year, there's a leakage you can stop. Reskilling, redeveloping people as another way to grow, and redesigning the team as a fourth way to grow. And right now, these four things are in different parts of HR, not talking to each other, not working in an integrated way. And so we've got to bring all this stuff together. So all of this leads to what I want to talk about next, which is talent intelligence. Now, I mean, AI is becoming almost a buzzword, right? I mean, I'm not sure we're going to use the word AI a year from now. Let me just say this, and we're going to talk to Perna about this in a minute. I don't think I've ever seen a technology in HR that has as much potential as this. And I've been working in HR about 24 years. And, you know, I started in the old mainframe days, so I've seen a lot of stuff. We thought the internet was big. I think this is bigger than that. Because what AI can do is it can take heterogeneous, disconnected data. By the way, I heard about something at Microsoft that's going to be cool along those lines. We'll talk about it in a minute. And we can make sense of it and not only generate content, but just understand it in a more integrated way than we ever could before. And so all of these use cases, and I won't go through them all right now, are places where vendors and companies are already building creative, innovative solutions in HR. You're not going to be able to do all of this yourself, and you're not going to be able to wait for all of these things to be mature. The solution today is to start trying stuff, which sounds a little bit weird because we're supposed to be the risk mitigation group in the company. But in the world of AI, if you're not experimenting, if you're not trying new things, if you're not doing skunkworks, prototypes, hackathons, you're going to be falling behind, because if your competitor is, and they find an application for HR and AI in any of these areas before you, you're going to be looking at them and wondering how they're doing what they're doing. So that's kind of what's going on. And it is, in fact, permeating every part of the stack. Now, I've been working on this chart for about a decade, and every time I look at it, I got to tweak it. But this big green thing in the middle that used to be a tiny, tiny sliver in some of the older versions of this chart is getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Because what's happening in HR tech is the transactional systems, the HCM platforms, are really becoming sort of this bottom layer. You still need them. I'm not saying they're going to go away, at least not in the near term. But all of the intelligence, all of the hiring, staffing, skilling, deployment, redeployment, career, job architecture, redesign decisions are going to be made at this green layer. If you're Netflix or you're Disney or you name any one of these companies that's getting disrupted by some competitor, and you want to do a reorg, and you need to figure out who are the people that have the skills for this function versus this function, you might as well hire McKinsey and figure it out, because you're not going to be able to figure it out if you go through Workday and try to make that decision. You don't even have the data. Well, you can do that kind of thing in Eightfold that you just couldn't do before. So many of these things that are happening in this green layer simply were not designed into the transactional systems we have. Now, what about this hairball skills thing? Can I be honest with you guys for a minute about this? I think we've way over-rotated on this. I remember being assessed my skills in 1978 when I got out of college. This is not a new idea. Of course, you have to have skills to do a job, right? I mean, we've always known that. We now have tools like Eightfold that can infer skills and give us signals about skills in ways that we never could before. But that's not the only thing we need. We also need to understand the context of those skills, the capabilities in which they're used. I was telling Perna this morning, if you look at the skill for Python, where are the number one supplier of Python skills? They're in India. But they're not necessarily building complex applications. They're using them for simple things. We need to know what they're using them for. And so what's been going on in skills is we've been kind of learning all these different sort of ideas and use cases, and I'm not going to kind of step you through this chart, but you can kind of think about it in your mind, that when the first idea of a skills-based organization, which again, that has gone a little bit too far, it really started in learning. I really started with the LXPs. And I visited a bank, maybe 6, 7 years ago, who had just bought Degreed, and the head of L&D said, "Oh, I know all the skills in the company." I said, "How do you know them?" "I can just go into Degreed. They're all there. I can just see what people are searching for, so I know their skills." I'm thinking, this is really not making sense to me. But I didn't argue with her. But you can see where we're going, is we're becoming more pragmatic and practical about this. I mean, the skills technology you can get out of Eightfold is great for many, many things, but you have to apply it. Are you redesigning your company because you're going into a new industry? Have you just launched a new product? Are you doing a new IT system? Are you moving into a new geography? Are you moving into a new product category? Are you a pharmaceutical company moving into a new scientific domain? Those are great applications for using skills technology. Just to assume that we're going to kind of use all the skills technology and turn it on and everything in the company is going to get better, well, maybe, but it needs to be applied, and we need to make the skills technology easier to use. Now, where talent intelligence comes in is really using this domain of understanding data and understanding skills and understanding, this is sort of the traditional stuff we've done over many years, is we can now do it at scale. We can now do it with precision. We can now do it with real-time data. I mean, tools like Eightfold can pick up new skills in the job market that are coming from new job titles or new job descriptions that some company put out somewhere in minutes. So you'll know about skills trending and skills opportunities inside of your company in ways you never did before. And that's really what's going on in talent intelligence, is using this data, this real-time, constantly updated data that's coming from employees too. It's coming from employees and managers and activities going on inside the company, but it's also coming from the outside world to solve real problems. Problems in underperforming organization, problems in hiring, problems in transformation. And if you're not thinking about the problem, and you go to your CFO and say, "We need this skills tool because it's really big and we got to get involved in the skills, become a skills-based organization, and it's going to be really good for all the employees," the CFO is going to say, "I don't know what you're talking about, but please go tell me something else right now. I'm busy working on this supply chain problem that I have." So that's my message on skills, is we have to apply it. And by the way, that is one of the things we've been working on with Eightfold, and Eightfold's done exceptionally well. If you look at the way Eightfold has packaged its product, I was looking at the banner outside that has the different modules. Eightfold has very deliberately taken all of the AI functionality that it has and packaged it into specific solutions in different parts of HR, each of which have an ROI to apply to particular problems in your company. We call this falling in love with the problem, not falling in love with the solution. It's really easy to fall in love with the solution and tell everybody why it's going to be so great, and they don't even care because they're thinking about the problem. So the more you get focused on the problem, the easier it is to do this. So what is going on in this market? Now, if you look at, you heard from Ashu yesterday, and you're going to hear from Satya in a little while. Eightfold, in some sense, is the first, and perhaps, I wouldn't say only, but certainly the first AI native end-to-end talent system. AI native meaning that it is capable of amassing any amount of data you can come up with. You can just find any data you want to put in there, and it will intake that data, and it will analyze it using the AI models that are running in it. It has multiple AI models to bring different solutions to market. Now, there are different ways to manifest that functionality. The original manifestation was really for recruiting. And so talent intelligence used to mean sourcing intelligence. It used to mean recruiting. And if you go through LinkedIn and you look at all the jobs in talent intelligence, 89, 90% of them are in recruiting, because that's what we thought it was and that's what it was used for. But what happened, as you look down at the bottom, is companies started to use products like Eightfold, and they realized, well, it's good for recruiting, but it's also good for internal recruiting. Oh, it's good for internal recruiting. It's also good for internal career management. Well, now if we're going to do career management, maybe we should look at job levels. Maybe we should look at pay. Maybe we look at job titles. Let's do org design. Let's do job analysis. And the more we started to use it, and a lot of you started to use these tools, all these new applications became visible and sort of imaginary, and then they started to become real. And so what's going on in talent intelligence is what I call the move from sourcing and recruiting to what I would call enterprise talent intelligence. And the paper that we just put out last week, which you guys can get from our website or Eightfold can send it to you, is really about 10 or 15 companies' use cases on how these different applications of talent intelligence came to be. One of them, by the way, is leadership development, leadership assessment. Leadership development, going back to the industrial age, was a bunch of hand-waving 9-box grids, right? I mean, there was all sorts of, conversations about, maybe we gave people some psychographic testing and so forth about who should get promoted based on whatever information we had. That can be done with talent intelligence too, and that's where Heidrick fits in. I believe, and I'm being honest here as an analyst, not just as a friend of Eightfold, that Eightfold is well ahead of the other vendors in the market. I think it's noisy and confusing. You're going to see a lot of noise on this. This is a big new space. So, of course, every vendor is going to pick up the message. But I think, at this particular conference, I think you have the opportunity to work with a company that in some sense pioneered this and is well ahead. And the final thing I'll leave you with, and then I want to bring Pern up here, is what about your organization and how do you take advantage of this stuff? Now, it turns out when you get one of these systems, you can look at it as a recruiting tool, which it's good at. The recruiters can use it and the staffing people can use it. But it does so many other things. How do you take advantage of it? Who uses it? What is the job role, the job title, the job function in HR that uses this platform that has all this information about your workforce and the external workforce, by the way? We use Eightfold for our GWI project because it has a lot of data in it about the job market in general, not just about what's going on inside of your company. Well, I think what's going on, and I'm beginning to get this information out from a big study we're doing, is that you're going to build a talent intelligence function. You're going to have people in your company that are going to bring together the power of this data and this information to leverage this enterprise-level talent intelligence solution in your organization. And this is going to be a magnificent career for many, many people in HR.